can, if you fix it, you will immediately be able to put in your whatever you understood also. So logging happens in a couple of ways. Again, this will work in clusters where you have full access. Again, some there will be some peculiar clusters where, such as NIC, where you only get access to certain one namespace. In that case, you cannot do this kind of logging that we are doing. Okay, we'll have to do a different approach. Anyway, for now, the most common scenario, like in most of the clusters, pretty much 90% of our clusters, this is how we do logging. So what happens here? Okay, yeah. So what happens here in this case is we run one service called Fluent Bit. Okay, that Fluent Bit will run as a daemon set. In Kubernetes, a daemon set means is a pod will run on every node, every worker node. Okay, so if there are 5 worker nodes, in every worker node there will be one such pod running. Okay, I'll come to why it is needed, why we do that, and stuff. But this is the thing that we use Fluent Bit. Okay, so of course, you need any details of what it does and more information at any point of time, you can always get it in entire description is there. I have a lot of documentation on it, so you can always go through those things. Okay, so having said that, what we do, I'm going to cover those things right now. Okay, so what we are running here, what doing here is we'll run FluentBit as a daemon set. What this daemon set is, we'll run one pod of FluentBit, so it's called an agent. And you run one pod of that in every node. We can also call it as an agent. Now, why we do this is we can also run a single pod, like how we do in any deployment, right? We can also do a single pod, and then make sure that all of our collection of these things can be submitted over network UDP or something like that. That is also one option, but those would be network intensive, as in these logs have to be streamed across the network to another node or wherever the other part of it, the actual pod is running, right? Every node one is where the pod is running. Okay, in that case, node one fluent bit is running, right? Let's imagine this, and then every other node one to five, right, will then uh, push logs or maybe UDP to fluent bit. Okay, as an aggregator, and fluent bit will then do something. Okay, this could be one approach of how we're doing it. Okay, this is one thing. So the other thing that some people do is they will run fluent bit as a sidecar to every pod, and that will scrape the logs and send it to whatever destination. Okay, in our case what we do is every pod, right, every pod will store its logs in the nodes. In its where on the node that it's running, it's going to save the logs itself. Okay, the files, it will always be there. Whenever you're doing kubectl logs, you're all basically tailing the logs from that file, right? So when you do pod logs, this node, it's stored on that node, and what this particular fluent bit instance is, it will run on each node, which means it has access to all the files, log files of all the pods running on that node. Okay, so next what it will do, it will gather all those logs and it will push it to a certain system, maybe do some processing on it, as in where is this, so either log files, right, will have metadata such as from which pod it is, which namespace it is, which container it is from, Kubernetes metadata. So it will enrich that metadata onto each of those logs, and then it can do something like push directly to Elasticsearch, push directly to FileBeat, so on and so forth. I mean, the syncs can be different. Okay, and instead of what we are doing is we ask FileBeat to push this to a Kafka queue. Okay, so that is where the infra Kafka comes. This logs will be scraped from each of those files in that node. It will push it to a Kafka queue after enriching some metadata. Once it pushes to that Kafka queue, we then ideally we're supposed to do, Abhishek's idea is, if you want to do some sanitization of logs, like removing sensitive information and stuff, you can do some stream processing on those Kafka's topics itself. Once it is done, you then push it to a sync like Elasticsearch, where you can actually search and visualize those logs. Okay, but we don't do the processing or sanitization and such as of now. So what we do is FluentBit will scrape the logs from each node. Once that node is scraped, the logs are there that will get pushed to Kafka. Then from Kafka, there's Kafka Connect, which will push those logs in Kafka to Elasticsearch. Okay, that is the whole flow. Okay, any
What is the interval that we have set right now to scrape it?
it'll be real time. It won't be in there's not no any interval or such.
Okay, so each time the file gets updated with log data, that will also push into the Kafka.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So who's the subscriber to put it in Elasticsearch from
So
Kafka?
yeah, one second. So what will happen here, right? You see this config file. I'll go detail. We go through this config file to understand everything. Okay. So these are the main configs. So we'll come back. Now let's consume these things. All the ones which start with input, right? There are two of them. So what we say is you tail the logs from the file system. So how often do we scrape the logs? We actually tail it real time. So what in your kubectl logs, right, or any log file, when you do tail -f, what happens? You get as the lines keep getting added to the file as they get appended, you also see it on your console. Same thing happens here. What it does is you're saying you tail the logs, okay, and you which files to consider for this is this part of it. Now, Kubernetes has a convention, as in all the logs get stored in this path /var/log/container slash. This will be the pod name and some other name here, but this part here, what you see here, right? This will be the namespace always. Okay. So what happens now if you want to scrape logs from a particular namespace, but you want to ignore all of them? The easy way to do would be to specify here egov. Now imagine tomorrow there's a different namespace you want to scrape. You can put a comma and then say iSpirit because we had iSpirit, right? You can add those here. Okay. This is a small DB that it maintains which says what was the last log line that had scraped in each of those files. Okay. This, I mean, you don't have to touch any of this. This is automatically maintained by them, but this is one of those files that you would not look at. Okay. Next, the same thing happens for eGov infra. Now, what is the difference between these two? Is we add different tags to each of them. Okay, so that the input plugin will only do the input, like it will collect those logs. Now, after the input plugin does that, we can use that tags to add more data into it. I told you we'll add some more data, right? As to add some annotations on stuff like Kubernetes annotation, like which pod did we scrape this log from, which namespace was this from, which container was this from. That we are saying don't do it for the infra logs because we don't want so much data. Only add this to the eGov services set. Okay. After that, what we are saying is the output plugins we configure. Okay. In the output plugin, we configure again we match the tag which says you get me the logs captured with this ego services log, and you push it to somewhere, right? We are using the Kafka plugin here, so we have to give the correct brokers, and it will push it to the appropriate Kafka output itself. Now, there are two different one which says the reason we have two different is because the ego services logs we push it to a certain topic, the Kafka infra logs we push it to a different topic. Okay, these will be substituted by environment variables. Okay, so that is now the major part of it. Apart from that, we have parsers that we have configured. Here we did parsing, right? I told you that we'll add some Kubernetes metadata and stuff. So that is part of this parsers. It will do some JSON because the logs are in JSON. It will try to parse. Okay, if the log is JSON, then I will just add the time. What is the time when I scraped it, and which pod and which container I scraped this log. Okay, so this is the major config file that is used. So the steps for Fluent Bit is first its input. You collect from where I should collect these logs from, then do some parsing, then the output. Okay. Okay. Any questions now? I'll pause again.
So this Fluent Bit, does it it also runs as a pod in the node or what? Hello.
Yeah, that's what he has been telling, no? Daemon set, right? Daemon set is generally one per node. Like let's say you have created a cluster with like five nodes, right? So each node will be having automatically a daemon set. Whenever you deploy a daemon set, anything when you deploy as a daemon set, right? So that
It
will
will
be
never go down with the node, right? One, as long as the node is there, the daemon set also will be there.
yes. And at the same time, right? So since Kubernetes, stores all the logs inside the node, so it is easy to scrape it as a daemon set.
Mhm. Okay. I guess I missed the first part. Thank you. Aniket, can you hear me, Gajendran? Network issue or what?
Nothing disconnect.
Gaju, maybe stop the recording and start when he comes back.